I enjoyed the academic work at Balliol, and clearly it was the basis of a successful and interesting career in economics, mainly at the Bank of England, some at the International Monetary Fund. That might have been much the same at any good university teaching economics and related subjects. But there was also a social aspect that was important. I think I felt happier and more relaxed here than I had at any point up till then, because I felt that this was somewhere I belonged. It's easy as an academically oriented child in a provincial town of Southampton of no great excitement to feel a bit of a misfit. Your ambitions are not those of many of the people around you. When I got to Balliol, I felt that I belonged. Here were people who were a bit like me. They had similar interests. They also liked sitting around discussing things. They liked writing essays. They liked browbeating their tutors with their latest opinions and analysis. Everybody there had worked hard to get to that point, so there weren't people who despised academic effort, as I'm afraid you find at most British primary schools and many secondary schools. And that feeling of belonging was something I noticed immediately. Halfway into my first term, I suddenly realised that I wasn't particularly keen on going home. And it wasn't because I didn't want to see my family. I was writing to them faithfully. It was just because I felt that here was where my friends were. And perhaps for that reason, even now, some of my closest friends are the friends that I made here.
I came here in 1975, October 75. I'd been to an enormous comprehensive school in South Wales. I was just turned 18. I was very young for my year. It was a big shock to the system. Obviously, I knew nothing about a place like this. I did not go to Eton. I went to a huge comprehensive school, very working class community in South Wales. So it was a massive shock to me. To go to Hall and to be reliant on my own learning experience. But I really enjoyed the time here. It went incredibly quickly. The terms were very short, 8-week terms, so it flew past. I didn't really get the hang of it until about the middle of the second year, and by the time I got the hang of it, it was almost time to leave. So the 3 years flew by. But I loved being in the point about this place is it was small. It's much bigger these days. But then it was about 450 students. All the fellows were here. Everything is here, the library is here, the hall is here. It's completely self-contained. It's the antithesis of going to a huge campus university. And it was a very tight-knit, male only, for better or worse, community. Women came just after we left. So it was strange, unique, and probably something you would not now experience.
Well, it was a very special place for me at the time, and I think in more recent years I've felt probably really its importance to me, because perhaps I just got on with my life after I'd been to Balliol, and then I guess I understood myself a bit more, and I began to notice things about myself, and I attribute some of that really to Balliol. For example, I really enjoyed myself when I was here. I don't think I fully exerted my, let's say, study skills to the maximum, because I was really partaking in all of the activities that the university has to offer and the college. So I think in a way what I've done since then is to compensate for a lot of the work that I should have done, but I can express that in a more precise way, in that what it's meant is that I'm living up to the standards that I believe that I should have been living up to at the time, which is to say that when I do things, I like it to be quite excellent, and so I impose quite high standards on myself. I don't necessarily expect it from other people, but when I do things, I like it to be as good as it can possibly be. And I think that quest for excellence is the thing that's really still with me.
It meant an enormous amount. It meant the possibility to study independently, to study with brilliant minds, I mean professors as well as undergraduates. It meant a sense of community. It meant a sense of pride and history, because I was very aware that Balliol was, in its way, the oldest of the colleges and the largest of the colleges. And it was a time of not only studying, but of going into all kinds of what I suppose now are called other pursuits. Theatre, journalism, film. And for me, Balliol was a crucial part of that, and an encouraging part of that, and a welcoming part of that.
Why did you do classics? What was your background?
One of the reasons distantly was it was easy to get in on classics, but in fact why I did Latin and Greek originally classics was because I wanted to be an actor, and I thought the basis of knowing English well is to know languages which were the root of English, which was classics, certainly Latin and ancient Greek. But then I got more and more involved as I suppose became older and more mature, and became completely swept away by the classical world, although in fact after MODS, which is I think the largest examination in Western Europe after the Mandarin civil service, I really was bored with things thousands of years old, and I did in fact change. I found a new course. My professor Jasper Griffin said immediately, "Oh yes, you're going to do English." And I said, "No, I can do that at home." But I found a new course which was classics and modern languages, using French, which at that time, it was a new course, went up to 1914. Unfortunately, the left hand and the right hand were in no way connected. I was a member of two faculties, and when I came to do my final examinations at the end of the fourth year, it took 17 days, and because I was already on a 4-year course as a classicist, I could not go to France for the language, and my French brought me down. But I still got, I believe, a better degree than Boris Johnson.
In my second year, I was at Balliol. I was on Dicey, which is the staircase at the very top of the building here, overlooking this church and graveyard and Martyrs' Memorial, which is where they burned 2 bishops in the 1550s. It was a pretty... Oxford was totally different then. Now we have this huge number of buses, huge number of tourists. Oxford was very, very quiet then. In the winter, it was icy, it was quiet, there was nobody here. I was completely nocturnal. I would work all night because I'd been so inefficient in the day. I felt I had to work between midnight and 5 a.m. to catch up. I was overlooking this churchyard. In November, there'd be mist swirling. It was a really eerie experience. And often I was moved, when I should have been working, I was moved to write really terrible poetry. A friend of mine said, who got a very good degree in English, said it was the worst poetry he'd ever read. But I'm going to read you some of this poetry, if you don't mind. It's very, very bleak, as befits poetry written over this, from above this churchyard. I want no mourners at my funeral, mouthing platitudes at a non-me. I want no wide words wrapped around bleak anonymity. All I want is to see myself, the nothingness and the necessity. These are really terrible poems, I should say, but I'm just trying to give you the sense of what, overlooking this churchyard at 4 a.m. in November 1976, or whenever it was, what that summoned up, which is pretty bleak thoughts, when I should have been working on my 19th century history. Okay, if I could get inside your head, what would I see? Thoughts of hope, hopes of thought, or utmost misery? If I could get inside your head, what would I see? But I cannot, nor ever shall, for you are me. Sorry, it's terrible, but I mean, again, I'm just trying to give you a sense. How I despise you and your cool beauty, your splendid contempt for me and my world. You led me into this land of possibility, let me breathe and believe again, then left me bare and burning, like a rock on the surface of a sea. you've probably suffered enough. That's enough. But I wrote a lot of poetry at university. Some of it was published in the magazine, the college magazine, and I did actually, almost as a joke really, stand to be Professor of Poetry at Oxford in 2011. I think about 11 people stood and I came 8th, which I thought was quite good. I think I got 81 votes, which was quite respectable. But I think Geoffrey Hill actually won. But I thought mine was a respectable showing. So, yeah, I had a very interesting time. But I could have got so much more out of Oxford if I hadn't been completely nocturnal and spent all my time just overlooking this graveyard. And trying to work, but always working very, very inefficiently.
Contractors rather than a professional groundsman.
I really fancy my chance of it. Let's go push one through.
We're here at the Masters Field, Balliol College sports ground, and this is where I learnt to play cricket. As a child I loved cricket, but I was a small bespectacled academic sort of boy, and at my schools I was always the scorer. My masters spotted that I was good at maths from an early age, and they also spotted that the smallest pair of pads were too big for my legs, so I couldn't move my feet to play proper shots. So right through school I was the scorer, travelling with the second 11 to various other schools, diligently noting all the scores down. And then I came to Balliol, and Balliol had the wonderful institution, the Erratics. The Erratics was for all the people who weren't good enough to be in the first 11, and everybody could play. So I was told, in my first year I volunteered to score for them, and they said, no, you play. So I played, and I found that I was actually quite competent at the game. And by the time I came back to do research, I was captain of the Balliol graduate team in 1983 that won graduate cuppers, and we won it right here on this ground. Rather fewer flats and rather more green grass than there was then. We were playing Nuffield. We batted first and made 239, and we bowled them out for 160 odd. When we'd won the cup, we realised that a cup winning team has to have its photograph taken with the cup. Well, it was easy enough to arrange to meet the following morning in the college, but we didn't have the cup because there was no cup for the competition. Being a young man of initiative, I went into the senior common room, borrowed a piece of silver, and that was the graduate cup for that year, and I still have the photograph on my lounge wall. Between being a beginner at cricket and being the captain of the graduate cup winning side, there were of course many ups and downs. There was the game where I kept wicket with Cressida Dick batting. She was a women's blue for cricket, one of the top players in the university. There was the game where I made my first 50 just before I left Oxford. People thought I would never make one. And then in my final summer term, I finally got to the magic mark. There was the moment when I hit a 6 into the grounds of one of those new buildings. And there were many extremely embarrassing and painful moments as well. The time that I captained a senior common room side which conceded 270 to the undergraduates and all the other dons, so we're never doing that again. Why have we spent our afternoon being bashed around by undergraduates who don't like us very much? Over the years the college has put a good deal of money into this. There are all those new buildings there, and then in the last 4 years we've built this new pavilion. I was present for the opening, which also marked the retirement of the college groundsman. As you can perhaps see, although it's still a very nice field, it's not maintained to quite the standard that Jim had maintained it, because Jim was a very keen cricketer himself and loved the batting wicket to be one of the best batting tracks in Oxford.
Oxford was such a magical place and a romantic one too. I remember one day it was snowing, and I know for a fact my girlfriend, who was from Zimbabwe, modern, well, it was called Rhodesia in those days, she'd never seen the snow before. So we both had the same thought, which was that she would run from her college and I ran from mine, and halfway between is the university parks where we are now. And we managed to meet each other, and this was before the days of mobile phones and internet. Just by intuition, we met each other in the middle of the park, and we embraced underneath the snow, and it was just such a magical moment.
Behind this blue door is a place of many happy and unfortunately now very sad memories. This was one of the largest cinemas in the city Oxford. When I came up as an undergraduate in my first year, from the window of Balliol College behind the Martyrs Memorial, I could look onto this, which then was the ABC Magdalen Street. It was one of two ABC cinemas in the centre of the city. My parents had brought me to Oxford the year before I sat the entrance examination, and we had stayed at then what was a very modern luxury travel lodge, the first motel in England, one of them at the end of the Woodstock Road. And we came to this cinema, I think it then was called the Super, and we saw Carry On Cowboy, one of the first, one of the best of the Carry On films. Little did I know I would spend so many of my Oxford days, nights, and launch my professional career through this place. When I came up to Oxford, I had won a competition in the New Statesman, which was a weekly left-wing paper, and I was Student Journalist of the Year. Other people wrote about Belfast and the Troubles. I wrote about sex and violence in the movies, a parodistic article essay, which was called The Rape of the Cinema. And with the money from that article, it was £27.50, I bought the first Interrail ticket and went to the Venice Film Festival. That was before I came to Oxford. And when I did come up to Oxford, most of the editors of the student press had read this article and immediately sent notes to my pigeonhole, as we used to call it, for receiving correspondence in the college, inviting me to become the film critic of the ISIS, which I was, a magazine, a fortnightly magazine, I think, the Charwell, which was a daily newspaper, and other publications.